What's up, Broncos country? Welcome back to the Broncos Podcast Network and YouTube for the latest episode of Broncos Now. As always, I'm your host, Sydney Jones, and coming up on today's episode, today marked day 7 of training camp. We'll hear from head coach Sean Payton as he discussed the team's emphasis on red zone work today. Plus, we'll hear from tackle Mike McGlinchey as he spoke for the first time this training camp. All that and more coming up. Today marked day 7 of training camp here at the Centura Health Training Center. And today, the Broncos put an emphasis on red zone work. Head coach Sean Payton detailed what he thought of practice today.
First day in the red zone, you know, obviously the trick there is you have to be good running the football. You know, we went through the top 10 teams last year offensively and defensively in the red zone, and we talked to him about like all the specifics. It's a pretty important special situation in our game. You know, good red zone teams typically are in the playoffs. So I would say the emphasis was a little bit more pass-driven, not run-driven today in those two team periods, because we'd already had our run periods.
Tackle Mike McGlinchey also spoke on the offense's work today and the offensive line's mindset in terms of the run game. We heard head coach Sean Payton say the other day that running the football has to be in this offense's DNA.
I firmly believe that you have to win games by running the football, and you command the whole flow of a game by being able to run the football. The NFL's about running the football and converting on third down, and if you can do those things well, you're going to have a really successful offensive football team. And I think we're built to do it. I think we have a great stable of backs. I think we have a great offensive line and coaches that are getting us all on the same page. And so it takes all 11 guys on offense to be able to run the ball well. It's not just the offensive line. I think we have a really great shot to do it, and I love the mindset from Coach.
With 1 week of training camp in the books, head coach Sean Payton talks about how he evaluates this team each day.
Look, my experience in training camp, there's kind of ebbs and flows with the momentum. You know, there'll be periods that go to the defense or the offense, and you keep moving. Periodically, we have to repeat a play, or if it doesn't look good, repeat a period. But I think we're able to watch the tape and make conclusions relative to performance and evaluations regardless of whether the play was successful or not, because there's a lot of 10 other people maybe are doing the right thing and one person doesn't execute. So, but I think, you know, it's something you look at with each play.
We also heard from safety Caden Stearns, and he was asked about his relationship with Kareem Jackson, given a potential increased role here for Caden.
That's big bro. You know, really, our uncle, he's older, so really old. So I just, you know, I look up to him. You know, I'm blessed to have him as somebody who's had a lot of knowledge in the game. And, again, there's no animosity or whatever. Just the nature of the beast is competition. So, you know, that's just how it plays out. But honestly, competition that's across the league, you know. Personally, I want to be one of the best safeties in the league. So I just kind of keep it that way. I compete against everybody. But when it comes to the room that we have, it's nothing but love. We all want to see each other do well, and that's what it is.
Plus, head coach Sean Payton announced why cornerback Riley Moss hasn't been at practice and why the team signed cornerback Fabian Moreau.
Update on Riley. He had a core muscle repair done by Myers in Philadelphia. It's going to set him back probably about 4 weeks. Kind of a sports hernia. It's not too uncommon. He had that yesterday, went well. He'll be back here this week. And but I think all along we were looking at more of a veteran corner. We had talked about that coming out of our meetings, you know, last weekend. So we signed Fabian yesterday, and we're right at 90.
Now joining me here inside the Broncos podcast studio is Broncos lead writer Eric Dalala. Eric, day 7 of training camp. We've had 1 full week of practice now, and, you know, today the team put an emphasis on red zone work.
Yeah, that's right. Said they spent a majority of their 11-on-11 work down there inside the 20, the tight area, the place where, as Sean Payton put it on this Wednesday, that's where you decide who makes the playoffs, and which teams are good in the red zone often decides who's winning football games, which teams are going to be in the postseason. So certainly an area of emphasis today. And said, you know, what stood out to me, obviously the offense wasn't perfect. There were a couple of nice plays, but K'Wan Williams had a big interception in the end zone, particularly in the last red zone period of the day. The defense at all 3 levels, you know, first team, second team, third team, really kind of won, quote unquote, won that session. But I thought what Sean Payton said was interesting, which is that when you look at it from kind of this untrained eye, you see the defense doing well. And certainly they are playing at a very high level.
Yeah.
But I think the thing to remember that Sean Payton pointed out is, one, the offense is still installing things. And so you're testing out, you know, you're not necessarily at this fine-tuning point of training camp yet. And the second thing is that he said several times now, the Broncos are running certain plays that they would not run against the Broncos defense.
That's a good point.
Because it's it's an odd front. You've got 3 defensive linemen, 4 linebackers. Obviously, if they were playing a team that had 4 down linemen, maybe some of these plays would be a little bit more successful. They're not game planning for these particular periods. And so there are going to be times where it looks like the offense is struggling, or maybe it looks like the defense isn't prepared for a certain play. That's because you're just kind of running what you're running right now. You're learning things. You're trying to see what works. So certainly the defense had a good day in the red zone, and I don't want to take anything away from that because they've been playing really well.
They really have.
The defensive line got a good push, but I would just caution as people watch this, whether you've come out to practice or you're listening to things, be kind of aware that there is that element that the Broncos are learning things offensively. It's a new system, and they're not trying to, quote-unquote, beat this defense right now.
Yeah, one guy that you mentioned, Eric, K'Wan Williams, I want to talk about him because I thought it was really interesting. Head coach Sean Payton, he talked about him today, and he said he's really stood out to him. We heard Kareem Jackson talk about him on Tuesday as well, and just how underrated he is as a corner. What is it about his play that you really like?
Yeah, he's physical. He's got the ability to track the football deep down the field and make plays. He does have an element of speed. I mean, typically you see these kind of nickel slot corners as smaller guys, and K'Wan's still got some size to him. So I think that helps him. Like I mentioned, physical football player. He's tough. I mean, I think back to last year where he had a club on his hand. For most of the season and still was out there making plays. He somehow, I think it was an interception. He had that play at the end of the Jaguars game in London.
Oh, yeah.
Big play where he's making that with a club on his hand. Just
impressive.
A really tough, instinctual, smart football player that makes the Broncos better because it doesn't matter. I mean, Pat Surtain obviously is incredible, and Damari Mathis I thought has played really well so far in training camp. But if you don't have a guy in the slot that can cover, you're susceptible there in the middle of the field. And then it doesn't matter how good Pat Surtain is or how well Damari Mathis is playing or how good Justin Simmons is back there. You need that slot guy in today's NFL. And K'Wan, you know, he's picked that up since he came in here last year, and he's done a really good job at it. Obviously, Bryce Callahan, when he was here, was a really good player, but I think K'Wan has even elevated that level on the field. And said one other thing he does well is he can blitz. I mean, I don't know if we'll see – I don't know how much we'll see of it this year, but certainly last year that was a part of his game coming off the edge. We saw him bat down a pass today. He's a really good football player, and the Broncos defense is much better because he's out there.
Definitely. You know, another guy I want to highlight, sticking with the defense here, Eric, is Nick Bonito. Coach said this is going to be a really important camp for him, and it seemed like he had a really good day out there. Yeah,
when we talked to George Payton about Nick Bonito back in March, he said Nick needs to get bigger, he needs to get stronger, and that is kind of one of the things that a lot of college players, especially defenders, need to work on when they get to this level. I think Nick showed pass rush ability last year in his limited action, but certainly all these guys, you know, having the size and strength to set the edge in the run game is important. I thought what I was most encouraged by, and there were some good pass rush snaps too by Nick Bonito during today's practice, but the last couple of days he's been good off that edge and, you know, shown that burst into the backfield, had a couple opportunities at tackles for loss. You know, it's one thing to do it in training camp and another thing to consistently do it during the season, but I think he's starting to show that he can be that guy. And so we talked about Randy Gregory, we talked about Frank Clark. Obviously, Jonathan Cooper's had a good camp. But if Nick Bonito can take the next step and be the kind of guy that the Broncos thought he was when they drafted him in the second round, that would be a huge boost for this pass rush kind of wave of guys that you have. And I'll be interested to see what he does in the preseason because he was certainly effective at Oklahoma. They have his former college coach, one of them there, and Jamar Cain.
Oh, yeah, right.
And so, you know, Sean Payton said sometimes it just takes a little bit longer for some of these guys, but he's somebody certainly to keep your eye on because he could take a big jump in year 2.
Definitely. I feel like the depth in that room is deeper than most people think when you originally, you know, look at it.
Yeah, and certainly if and when Baron Browning comes back, that'll help. And if Nick Bonito can play at a high level, if Jonathan Cooper kind of takes this step that it looks like he's taking, those are all be kind of big things that'll help. And, Mike McGlinchey talked about it. You've also got Zach Allen, DJ Jones. When you have a pass rush that in general kind of works together across all gaps, it just helps everybody find success. Whereas if you have kind of one guy playing well and everybody else isn't doing that, it's a little bit harder to get to the quarterback because there's room to move around. If you collapse the pocket, obviously, nowhere for them to go.
Right. Well, Eric, we heard earlier in the show from head coach Sean Payton talking about, Riley Moss and how he's going to be set back a few weeks with that core muscle repair procedure that he had. In terms of the rest of the roster, we've seen guys in and out of practice a bit the past week. Can you give us just an injury update on everyone else?
Oh, man, yeah. Well, so obviously Tim Patrick, he went on IR, so he's officially done for the season. When you get put on IR before the 53-man roster cut, you cannot come back. So his season is done. Again, we've sent our thoughts out to Tim. We'll do that again. KJ Hamler obviously was waived with his non-football illness. We'll see what happens there. In terms of who did not practice on this Wednesday, you saw Yasir Durant, who left practice early on Tuesday. He was not out there. And then Jonas Griffith, maybe a guy to monitor, inside linebacker, obviously at this point kind of projects as one of those reserve players, but a big, strong physical player. We don't know any details about what happened to him, but Sean Payton mentioned that he went down on Tuesday, and they're kind of monitoring that. Still likes the depth, it sounds like, with some of the young guys at inside linebacker. But those are kind of where those guys stand. Randy Gregory, Aaron Patrick did not practice on Wednesday, but they were out there. It kind of seems more like a maintenance deal as they both come back from injuries. And Javonte, as he comes back from his knee injury last year, did some walkthrough, but nothing during team period. So seems like everything's fine there. You talk about at this point kind of those three quote unquote major injuries in Patrick, Hamler, Riley Moss, who will be back. And then we don't know what's going on with Griffith, if that's a serious deal or not. So we'll just have to wait and see. Listen, Sid, injuries are going to happen. I know the team is very happy with Bo Lowry, and that was a big addition. But for people that thought injuries weren't going to happen or they were just going to go away completely, that's not how football works. So got to try and survive them and knock on wood that guys stay as healthy as they can. But, listen, they're also working hard out there, and it's been physical. So, last year the Broncos didn't push it very hard in training camp, still had all those injuries, kind of trying the opposite approach here of getting calloused, working hard, being physical, and seeing if that prepares them for the season.
Well, the team will get in some more red zone work tomorrow, and referees are going to be out there for the first time tomorrow as well.
That's right, Sid.
Yeah, it takes things up a notch.
Yeah, get some calls out there. There were some plays out there today that maybe a flag would have been thrown, a defensive holding or an offensive pass interference. Guys, was this play inbounds? Was it out of bounds on a catch? We'll get some more official rulings here when they get out to practice. A
little bit more saucy out there.
Yeah.
We love to see it. Well, Eric, appreciate you joining the show today. I'll see you again tomorrow.
Perfect. See you, Sid.
Well, that'll do it for today's episode of Broncos Now. Broncos Country, thanks so much for tuning in. I'll be right back here in the Broncos podcast studio for another episode tomorrow. I will see you all then.